Hey, what's up? This is Twisted Mind, and you're watching the First Look series, an overview of the changes made to your class going into the Mists of Pandaria. Shamans of all specs now bring the raid-wide mastery buff through their Grace of Air, and also Shamans of all specs bring the raid-wide spell power 10% booster through their Burning Wrath. Shamans of all specs can also bring the Weakened Blows debuff through their Earth Shock, however this should be provided through your tanks. Enhancement Shamans bring the melee and attack speed bonus through their Unleashed Rage by 10%, and Elemental Shamans bring the rare Spell Haste buff by 5% through their Elemental Oath. Shamans of all specs will notice that their totem bar when they log in is gone. This is because the totems now aren't fire and forget buffs, so placing 4 at a time, although can still be done through macros, isn't something that Blizzard wants to promote as acceptable gameplay. They'd rather see totems as something you kind of have to actively manage both in position and as for their utility. This is further supported through the new talents. In the process of losing our totem buffs that were fire and forget, we actually gained a few utility totems, so give them a look over on a popular website. Through the process of the changes through beta, Shamans actually did get to keep all of our shields, so we still have lightning and water as baselines, and we also got to keep some of our weapon enchants that served only utility purposes, so we still have Frostband and we still have Rockbiter. Shamans of all specs will know that Ghost Wolf is now an instant cast. It can be glyphed to auto walk on water and not go below 100% run speed. I'm putting Purge out here because you can offensively glyph it to dispel 2 magical debuffs, and our Cleanse got the same treatment as the other dispels. It's now on an 8-second cooldown, but it will dispel all curses, and if you're resto, all magic effects. Wind Shear's interesting because all melee specs have an interrupt on 15-second cooldown. Ours is on a 12 by baseline, however, it doesn't do the same amount of lockout as the other melee spells, so you can actually glyph for it to be up to a 15-second cooldown, and it will still do that 4-second lockout that the other melee interrupts do. Personally, I just keep it unglyphed because, hey, it makes us back to the class that has the fastest interrupts again. Enhancement got a few tweaks, but for the most part, it's more the same as it was in the last expansion. When you learn it, you'll get all your familiar enhancement abilities. The only real DPS cooldown you get for specking enhancement is your wolves. They got a utility boost because now they give you a heal when they do damage. The glyph from Shamanistic Rage has been baked into the ability for this expansion. You also get a new ability when you spec enhancement called Spirit Walk. It basically clears all your movement impairing effects, gives you a sprint. Don't forget, you also get a Hand of Freedom essentially with one of your new utility totems. And you can use Earth Grab at any time without fear of dropping off any important buffs. Your fire totems are what are key in keeping up in part of your rotation. Essentially you want to have Searing Totem up at full time, but check out what happened. They buffed it up so that the Searing Flames passive can now also be provided when your Fire Elemental does his melee hits, so you can use it as a burst cooldown now in your rotation, and that's one of the things you can tweak at level 90 as well through talents. Unleash Elements is still in our rotation in the same priority that it was in the previous expansion. You still want to try to use it to get that extra super damage from your Flame Shock, which is something you should try to maintain that 100% uptime on. Something that should be noted about that Unleash Elements, if you do it in level 90, take that Elemental Blast, it does benefit from your Unleash Elements. So mind that spell in the refresh game when you go to reapply your Flame Shocks and Unleash Elements buff is rolling. And other than those minor tweaks, your rotation is the same priority that was in last expansion. You want to have Lava Lash at the top of the priority, followed by Storm Strike. Then you want to have your Maelstrom weapon being dumped off at 5 stacks with your Lightning Bolt. However, note that if you did take that Elemental Blast at level 90, that does actually work with your Maelstrom procs, so you want to dump those off first if that's off cooldown and you have that spec'd. And then Earth Shock at the bottom of the priority list. Refresh Searing Totem at about 3 seconds before it falls off, and try to get your Flame Shock also refreshed right before the last tick. For your AoE, you want to drop your Magma instead of your Searing. Put Chain Lightning in instead of your Lightning Bolt for your Maelstrom procs, and use Fire Nova on cooldown. Note that Lava Lash will spread around your periodic effect from your Flame Shock, so use Unleash Elements with your Fire Nova if you can. And other than these other minor updates to your rotation, it should be the exact same that it was all through Cata. So it should feel very familiar. Note that the skill cap still exists for dumping off your Lightning Bolt at maybe not 5 stacks of your Maelstrom. And that's only if you eyeball a lot of those abilities about to come off rotation cooldown at the same time. But don't do it all the time, because then you'll be delaying your swing timer, and that's lost DPS, so nothing's changed, not even the secondary stat. You still want to stack Mastery after you reach your expertise cap. And note that Enhancement also got to retain some of its utility for its healing, comparatively compared to all the other hybrids. I'm showing the Stormlash totem, which it's on a 5 minutes, so you can't refresh it with the talents that refresh all totem durations, but it's a nice little boost to your raid DPS during a heroism, which you have control over because you're a shaman. And in the dead time of our rotation, we can still drop our healing totem. And do note that the spell resistance mechanics aren't really in the game anymore. However, this totem can be glyphed still to reduce the amount of spell damage taken, which is pretty cool. So look for a way to abuse that mechanic. And then also your Maelstrom weapon can still be dumped off with Healing Rain, which for whatever reason we still have in our healing toolkit along with Healing Surge. Your Greater Healing Waves and your Healing Waves of course have been axed, but the hybrid classes across the board kind of got treated in that way. And it still has some synergy, the healing does, with your conductivity talent. And you can glyph for your Lost Maelstrom procs to make those healing dumps even more productive than they normally would be, if you choose to glyph for it. Resto Shamans! When you do spec Resto, you get some of those familiar favorites back from the last expansion. Note here that they did give you Lava Burst, so if you do want to do Helps and Burst, you can do that. Same buffs and rules apply. You want to keep Water Shield up 100% uptime. There's no more charges you have to juggle anymore, so that's a nice quality of life. And you want to keep your Earth Living up. You get Earth Living when you spec. Still want to keep your Earth Shield on the main tank. Note that your Earth Shield still does have those charges, so you still want to be managing it in your healing bars to make sure it's still up on that tank. You get the magical component still put on the Cleanse. You get the old raid cooldown, Spirit Totem. Note that you want to manage like when that totem's out because you don't want to throw up another utility totem that will delete it. And you also get Mana Tide Totem. For the big three, Healing Surge was a baseline for all shamans, but this is the only spec that has Healing Wave and Greater Healing Wave. The Riptide rotation is still in the game, but mana's really tight at level 90. For now anyway, wait for gear, but for now it's still really tight, so probably going to see a lot of healing waves, so I would suggest glyphing this healing wave. This is probably going to be your filler spell that you're going to be casting. Showing off the Riptide passive here, but no, you're probably not going to be casting those healing surges anytime soon, so unless someone is like literally about to die in the next 1.5 seconds. There's some kind of cool stuff going on with Riptide, and it actually saw a few changes just recently. You can leave it unglyphed the way it is right now, still on a 6-second cooldown, still follow the always be casting. However, if you like a more hot style, you can actually glyph Riptide to severely reduce that heal that it does up front. However, note that it's now reduced to 90% instead of 100, so it still casts Resurgence, which means it's not going to dump off your mana so quickly. So if hots are your thing, you can actually kind of turn into a mini druid with this glyph. It's kind of interesting, and it hopefully won't you. I could see it being really good in rated BGs where you're subject to interrupts. The totem that you're going to want to actively manage is your Healing Stream totem, so you're probably going to want to place that into some sort of UI configuration where you can see the 30-second duration. And do note that it's a water totem, and so is your Mana Tide, so make sure you don't override one of the two of those by dropping it. And there's some sort of cool fun stuff you can do with it. This new totemic projection, you can like move it all over and try to make that smart heal who you want it to. You know, if a group spread out. Healing Raid, your staple, still in. The ticks that it's doing are subject to your haste, so mind those new haste plateaus. And you want to bread and butter this up with your other AoE heal, Chain Heal. Now, here's the thing that's going on with Chain Heal that makes it interesting. Still does the same thing that it did last expansion. However, note that this ability is like the single reason that we can't heal spread out, because both of our AoEs force people to be clumped together. There is a workaround with it, technically. You can glyph this glyph of chaining to try to manage that healing spread out a bit better. However, it does place that cooldown on Chain Heal. It sounds like it would cripple your healing per second, but you know, if people are spread out, this does have some synergy with that conductivity, and you can get creative with your AoE healing in this manner, so at least there's that option now available to us. Between that and rolling our tidal waves, it also might save us a little bit more mana in this style of AoE healing. And hey, what about that mana? Are we still cripplingly tied to Telluric Currents? Technically, no, we're not, because your Lightning Bolt here costs about 1.4% of my base mana, and Telluric Currents does return 2% of our mana, so yeah, I mean, theoretically, it's an active mana gain, but it's so bad now. And the Lightning Bolts aren't scaling with damage, these are fixed rate numbers for mana return, so, I mean, if you want to play that game, you can still do it, but you know, at this point I would recommend just like don't even game it. You're not going to have enough free global cooldowns to weave in an entire Lightning Bolt. Do note that Ancestral Fortitude is out of the game, but the health benefit from it is still attached as Purification, so yeah, rock on. We don't have to worry about keeping tanks buffed with that really annoying Ancestral Fortitude, but we still get that awesomeness of increasing people's health pools. And look at B, it's not even attached to crit, so how awesome is that? On top of that, for DPS, we're pretty much hit capped, and it's kind of like this for all healers, but it's extra good for shamans because we have so much burst with our lava burst. And we've got a lot of passive healing coming in still. We still have Ancestral Awakening and Earth Living, so between those two, there's a lot of automagic healing going around. Also mine that new healing totem. And the toolkit for the most part remains unchanged. I mean, you still have the same buttons that you had in the last expansion. Really, you're not looking to add a whole lot. Just remember, since at the beginning of an expansion your mana's really tight, you're going to probably want to start throwing your Unleash elements back into your rotation a bit. What that means is you want to like drop that and then drop your healing waves on a tank or something and try to make sure that it's not overhealed too much. It's just a clever little mana technique. For your AoE, Focused Insight's not in the game anymore, so if you liked dropping that super healing rain on the ground with it, I'm sorry, it's gone. But, you know, our AoE is looking under some serious consideration right now in beta, so the numbers might get tuned, and hey, I'm thinking we might actually be overpowered if they over-adjust it, so fingers crossed. And mana is not just tight for our class, it's tight for all healers, so look for some raid invites because you can actually bring a mana tide. Our talents are really where we're getting those toolkits from. You know, I'll get to the level 87 ability in a bit, but we do have a pretty good cooldown tier looking at level 75. If you wanted a 3-minute throughput cooldown that you can line up, you know, you want to take your Healing Tide totem, but, you know, don't discredit the Ancestral Guidance. It's, like, really good for tank healing situationally if you don't want it to overheal. Conductivity's looking good with the Glyph Chain Heal. There's some mini tricks you can do with your totems. Elemental also got most of those passives that you had in the previous expansion's talent tree baked in as passives, so that's pretty cool. Should be familiar for you. Like Enhancement, the critical totem that you want to keep down in your rotation 100% is one of your fire totems. Searing for your single target, your burst AoE, and you know this can tweak at 90 depending on your talent choice, your fire elemental, and magma for your AoE. Following the AoE department, Earthquake's still in the game, it still does physical damage. You can actually glyph for it to be a slow, and that stun knockdown thing that it does. And then your Chain Lightning doesn't have a cooldown in this spec, so roll Chain Lightning spam for AoE as well. They kind of want us to use Earthquake instead of only Chain Lightning, so I don't know, if you want to play their game, throw that into your AoE rotations. I personally haven't looked to see if it's like a DPS gain yet, so I don't know what to tell you. And yep, that's it, no changes. Same rotation, same priority as it was last expansion. Face roll your lightning bolts, you want to try to maximize your lava bursts, and you know, your skill cap is still there for using an Unleash elements to drop a lava burst as you're refreshing a flame shock, but yeah, otherwise this should feel really familiar with you. I don't actually remember if they had this power aura in the game, but Fulmination now, it procs its little animation at like 7 charges, which is when you should be dropping it around 7 to 8 charges instead of letting it cap at 9, so that's kind of cool. Your instant lava bursts are still in the game, so try to maximize the procs as fast as you can see them popping up. So keep your stop casting macros in the game. I will say this about the glyphs though, apparently a lot of classes are having trouble managing their mana at 90, so I mean your Thunderstorm is still returning a silly amount of mana in the world of fixed mana pools. You can basically glyph for it to come off cooldown even faster, and you can glyph for it not to do its knockback. The knockback glyph is a minor, so just note that. Those options are available to you if you're struggling. And then, this is something I'm actually kind of really bummed about, but one of my favorite things about playing this class as Ellie is that you can just like roll your lightning bolts while running. There's now a drawback to glyphing for your moving lightning bolts. That's right. It now increases their cast time if you glyph for it. So in the world of theoretical patchwork DPS, you don't want to do this. But in my mind, that just means carry a lot of those glyph or the dust disappearance stacks on you, so you can like properly switch that glyph in and out of any fight that you're doing that has heavy movement. Also something that applies to both LE and Enhance. You can extend that duration if you're Flame Shock, you can glyph for it. There's a lot of ifs and drawbacks to that though. I mean, if it doesn't run its full duration, it's a loss of DPS. Also, I think it's so properly tightly tuned that Unleash Elements on it unglyphed is also more DPS, so I don't know, I'd have to look into that. Now, I have my talents page open and I'm showing you 2 of these new burst DPS talents, and I mean, these are essentially two cooldowns that you can line up as an elemental shaman, but here's why they're like silly good. Our level 87 ability that you get at all specs is called Ascendance, and for elemental, it turns you into this monster that can roll lava bursts with no cooldown, and that means like every lava burst is a guaranteed crit. People are saying that lava beam isn't so good, but this lava burst rolling, I mean your mastery still applies to the double chance to proc a lava burst. So if you line this up with a few choice talents and this new cooldown totem, it's on a 5-minute, you can just turn into this like Super Crit Burst Machine. I'm not going to show a video because I haven't leveled my Shaman, but I mean, you can YouTube it up and find some of these early videos of people doing this mega damage. And also, it's a nice cooldown for Enhancement for AoE, and for Restoration, it's basically the green buff from Ultraxian, so it's pretty cool, but I don't know. I mean, all of these abilities can be used in Arena, so we'll see what happens. It's all fire damage, so it can be interrupted, and you'll be locked out of your fire school. But, I mean, I'll just definitely say that this has made this spec look really fun going forward, so I'm looking forward to leveling my Shaman to 87. If you like this vid or others on my site, you can help support me by liking, favoriting, subscribing, and even commenting. I'll try to respond best I can. And thanks for all the support, guys. I really do appreciate it.